Welcome back. Why does there seem to be so much conflict between parents and teenagers?
Here to help us answer that question from Journey Counseling is Counselor Gail Nelson. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
It's hard to balance that parent-child relationship, isn't it? And child, I mean, teenager. They're always a child.
It is.
In your eyes, but
yeah. Well, there's so much going on, and that's truly, I think, what we look at with every kind of developmental stage. There's a lot going on. You think of it when they're little, and there's so much. But I think we forget about that as they tend to get older, that's still a developmental stage.
Right, exactly. And you mentioned a really good point in some of your notes about how you need to keep treating teenagers as you would treat them when they're younger, right? Be encouraging rather than condescending.
I think so. I think there's a lot of, I like the definition of discipline is teaching responsibility. So even when you were teaching your little child to maybe take their plate to the sink or whatever that task was, we still need to develop them all the way through to get them ready to live on their own. So you're teaching them, and I mean, the room comes up all the time with teenagers, right? And that's a fight I didn't want to pick. It's like, fine, it's your room. But we had an agreement. If company was coming over and there was going to be a house tour, then the room had to be picked up. But otherwise, like, yeah, it's your space. Figure it out.
That's good. That's a good way to look at it.
But don't berate the child as if, like, no one will ever marry you. Like, oh, sorry. They're not really caring about getting married at that point in their life.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
Maybe when they're 4,
They're like,
but
good, I'm single. But I think you bring up a great point about making agreements. Even with Isabella, we do this, and it just seems to work so well. As long as we tell her what's coming down the pipeline, she's cool. If there's a lot of uncertainty, it can cause a little bit of some challenges. Talk to us about having that conversation and building those agreements with older kids.
Well, I like the technique, Chris, when they talk about like helping kids figure out a different way to do something. So I'm thinking like with teenagers, a lot of times parents will call when they just can't get along or they're thinking their child is just being so rude. I was like, well, what if you encourage them to, when you catch them in that moment of doing something that you don't value or you don't agree with, what if you could just say, could you try that again? And then give them another chance. And I think a lot of times the kids will kind of, watch even themselves as an observer. Yeah, that probably wasn't the best way to do that. They might, oh, I'm sorry, Mom. Yeah, I could. But if you could invite them to try to figure out another way to come at that behavior, because there's a lot going on. They may really honestly feel like they've been offended and then they respond rudely. So it's on both parts, the parent and the teen.
So that's exactly how you would say it? Like, you want to try that again because I found that a little offensive, or not even that part?
Well, you sure could. I guess as a parent, you want to give accurate feedback. And I think that's maybe the part we skip over sometimes when we're just mad and we're upset. And then I think parents take it on themselves a lot of times, like, I don't want my kid looking like that, and it's about them. Like, well, teach your child how to represent themselves better as well. And the family, they do represent the family. So.
Talk about as especially from an opposite sex perspective, as the opposite sex goes through those maturity changes, i.e. puberty. I had a buddy of mine, we were out golfing. He's like, man, my sweet daughter, she's so great, and now she's going through that time. And he's like, I'll walk in the kitchen and come back and it's like I'm facing the devil. He said it's just on a dime. So I think for a guy, it's hard to understand what is going on there. So help share with us, what do you do when they're going through that?
You don't have all that going
Yeah,
through.
right. And he's just like, dude, what did I do?
When you think of even the metamorphosis that has to happen for that human being to go from who they were as a child to who they need to be as an adult, I think that's too, the parent, you have to step back a while and figure out. So if you weren't, as a male, you knew what that male metamorphosis was like, you're right. There's going to probably be a gap there for fathers. And yet, that tenderness and kindness that can come from a father to help a daughter is like none other.
Huge, yeah.
Yeah, so, maybe spending some time or, again, maybe treating her more like a young woman than a child and see what happens. See if she can adjust.
Do you ask and say, hey, what are you going through right now? Or you just feel a little off center, or you just sort of let it ride, or?
I think, again, that's that good feedback where you invite and you help them learn how to communicate what's going on for themselves and encourage them.
Especially if it's from your dad.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, we'll be right back with more from Gail Nelson. Stay close.